I'm joined now by a Brandeis alum who played 2 seasons of basketball with the Judges, worked at Nike within their sports marketing division, and served as the head of basketball business development at Boris Corporation. Not to mention he was a scout for the Phoenix Suns. On behalf of myself and Brandeis University, Antonio Willliams, thank you for taking the time to join the program today.
Appreciate it. Always interested in connecting with my Brandeis roots. And
Graduating in 2003 with a degree in American Studies and a minor in economics, where did the inspiration brew from to pursue a career in sports management?
um, I think I always wanted to work in sports. It was either sports or entertainment for me. My mother always talked to me about working in something that I was passionate about, and sports and entertainment were sort of the avenues that I was pursuing. And I was pursuing both of those simultaneously, and an opportunity to work in the NBA league office presented itself after my numerous internships in sports and entertainment. And I moved to New York, worked in the league, and it was great.
Can you provide our listeners with a brief timeline of your various stops in sports business?
Yeah, and I worked, of course, worked in the NBA league office, then came back to Boston and worked in baseball operations and scouting for the Boston Red Sox. We were able to win the 2004 World Series, which broke the 86-year curse that everybody that's a Red Sox fan, and I'm sure there'll probably be some Yankee fans that listen to that too. And we're the only team in Major League Baseball history to be down 3-0 and come back and win a series. So that was an amazing experience. I played baseball when I was young as well. So to connect with baseball and do it with such a reconnect, I should say, with the game and do it with such a storied franchise that is embedded in the social fabric of a region. Also, one of the storied franchises in Major League Baseball. It was an amazing experience. So I enjoyed that immensely. And after that, I was fortunate enough to go back into basketball and work for ESPN as a scout, writer, analyst. Didn't know that I was a quote unquote media personality until I got to ESPN. It was like, okay, what do you want to talk about? And so I started thinking about all the things that I wanted to talk about, write about, analyze from a basketball perspective as well. So all those things were great. Again, I got to see the business from another sort of lens. Um, and then after that, I was fortunate enough to go and work in basketball sports marketing at Nike, and that was an amazing experience. Saw the game from another lens as well. And then I went to the Boris Corporation and led that financial management group in the basketball division. Started it, led that group there, which was another awesome experience, and to see the game from another lens. And then went on to the Suns, and that was a great experience also. And now sort of helped lay the foundation for that team that played in the finals a couple of years ago. So again, saw it from that perspective. Always wanted to sit in that seat. Was fortunate enough to be there. And then 2020 went back into the media. So now I'm in the media again as a show host. I do some writing as well, again, on basketball, and I'm also do some consulting for professional teams as well. So really enjoying my ride, and this is a great industry for sure.
So fair to say it's something about the hustle and bustle, the fact that I assume it's few hours of sleep every night and that you're always on your toes. It's something that just you love to do.
No doubt, no doubt. It's I enjoy doing it, and it's I say this a lot. This industry is crazy, and when I talk to my colleagues in the industry, we all talk about how crazy it is, and then I say to them, "Well, we're fighting to continue to be a part of it." So, what does that say about us? Oh, so yeah, I love it. I love it. The fact that it's untraditional. No 2 days are alike. No two relationships are alike. So it's great.
Yeah, last fall I held an internship remotely with an NBA player marketing agent, and this past summer I held an internship at a media company in Washington, D.C. And I can say that if you take your foot off the gas, then everything's going to pass you by, and the odds of you catching up are extremely rare, and best of luck with that.
No question. No question. You got to stay active in this industry for sure. Technology is making it where you have to continue to stay, because what's happening is as we have technology sort of emerging and being a part of this industry, is making everyone much more efficient. And it also, you have areas that are blind spots in terms of evaluating players and teams and brands as well. And technology really shines the light on some of those blind spots. And if you're able to take advantage or leverage some of those blind spots, you can continue to carve out your niche in this industry. That's for sure.
When you talk about technology, can you briefly touch upon how you utilize technology in an international sense? So whether it was evaluating players for the Phoenix Suns abroad or working with ESPN and say, international markets in Europe or Africa, wherever it may be.
Yeah, lots of, whether it's using various video and statistical platforms to evaluate players when you're doing it sort of remotely. That's a big part of the
And
job
especially during
now.
COVID.
Right, no question. That's a huge part of it, and especially during COVID, and especially with the fact that these franchises now are, their valuations are in the billions now. So with the franchises and their valuations being in the billions, guess what billionaires like to do? Save money. So if they can find ways to have you evaluate players without taking those international trips, and they'll certainly do that, if we can find a way to continue to be efficient and really do our jobs and hone in on our jobs, but utilize that technology and doing it in a way that's cost effective. Everybody's searching for that. Now, having said that, I don't believe, for me, the eye test and being there in person and feeling the environment and feeling how the player responds to that environment and watching how the player interacts with teammates or watching how the player interacts with the coach once something doesn't go the way that the player planned it to go. There's no substitute and there's no replacement for that. And there isn't any metric that can evaluate that. There also isn't any metric that can evaluate the sheer, I'd say, the raw love for the game for a player, because there's so many things now that, whether it's outside training, whether it's weight training, whether it's film, those things are mandatory now. And those things, when we were playing, those things indicated your love for the game because they were considered extra things to do. Now, all of those things are mandatory. So I don't necessarily ask anymore how hard a player works, because there's so many things that are mandatory that if you're on a college team, for example, it doesn't matter what level you're on, you're going to work hard. My question is, how do you attack the process? Do you attack it with that organic love and passion, or do you do it because you're sort of Marshawn Lynch, I'm just here so I don't get fined type of attitude? So if you attack that with love, if you attack that with organic passion, and you really want to get better, those players and those teams continue to elevate. And the people that do it just because they just have to be here, those are the players that stay the same.
As someone with interests in sports and entertainment, is it fair to make the assessment that Moneyball was a film that accurately captures how MLB teams conduct scouting and analyze player contracts?
To a certain extent. To a certain extent, everything, there is a dramatization to it once you want to make it a movie. But to a certain extent, I can say when I was with the Red Sox, there's this thing that we were all Moneyball and that's all that we relied on. And that's not true at all. If you look at some of the players that were on our roster, I mean, we had players with incredible power numbers, and those are guys that you're going to pay a fortune for. Manny Ramirez, David Ortiz, those are guys that you pay a fortune for. Those are guys that may not be sort of Moneyball darlings because, hey, they have the most power. Manny Ramirez at the time may have been the most dangerous right-handed hitter in baseball at the time. He and maybe Albert Pujols, but those guys were incredible, incredible hitters. And you look at Manny and you're saying, okay, is he a Moneyball darling because he's the most dangerous right-handed bat in baseball? Probably not. So with that being said, I think when you're looking at the best practices from an evaluation standpoint, I think the teams that do it the best do give you a little bit of both. I think that's what the Dodgers are doing. Yes, everybody looks at their payroll and things of that nature, but they also do a great job of looking at the numbers and analyzing the numbers and making decisions also.
Whether it was at ESPN, Forest Corporation, working with the Phoenix Suns, or even now as the host of the Antonio Williams show, did you find it difficult to transfer skills and expertise from the prior job to the next, or was there a fair amount of consistency?
No, no, those transferable skills are great. I think transferable skills are awesome. I think in this world, we have to continue to have a little bit of versatility because companies are what they call right sizing, which means they're eliminating positions. And, if you are a person that is in the UK, they call it redundancy. Um, and all the different euphemisms they have. So having those transferable skills makes it where you can sort of shapeshift and get yourself in different positions to do different jobs. And the other thing about it as well is you have to be open to learning and you have to have a level of accountability to yourself and the people that you work with. Because if you're accountable to yourself and the people that you work with, you're open to learning and you approach it with, you walk that line of being confident and having that belief in yourself, but also that belief in yourself it actually lends itself to you seeking more knowledge and being accountable to people and learning from people and taking direction from people as well.
In early July 2021, the NCAA implemented a policy allowing student athletes to reap financial benefits from NIL deals. Having worked at Nike, can you provide insight into how business deals changed after this decision? Again, from the perspective of the company providing NIL opportunities now to athletes rather than the school?
Well, I think what you just touched on is very important. I think there's this, and college athletics has a lot, everything's about narratives. And I've learned that being in the media, everything's about narratives. So, college athletics, for people that are not in favor of athletes being able to monetize their brand while they're competing on college campuses, everybody that's not in favor of athletes having that liberty, they have fallen into, well, these guys and girls are getting paid now. And what college athletics has allowed is the narrative to be pushed that this is sort of a revenue sharing model. And let's be frank, let's be honest, this is not revenue sharing. The colleges aren't paying the athletes a dime. And so especially when you're looking at the highest level, what these schools are able to, and you're seeing, I'm from California, UCLA, USC are now going to the Big Ten in a couple of years. So they are literally going to play. Rutgers is also in the Big Ten. So USC and UCLA will play conference games 3,000 miles away from their campus. And so with that being said, there is no way that you can refer to them as student athletes when you're talking about that. This is all about money. This is all about the Big Ten, all of these major conferences continuing to expand their footprint, and these colleges and universities going to these mega conferences, because from the television rights for these conference deals, these schools are getting 50, 60, $70 million a year. That's why they're doing this. And I say that because back to the revenue sharing, the colleges and universities that are participating in this at the highest level don't give any of that money to the student athletes, not a dime. So what student athletes are able to do is to come up with their own marketing deals. So you still have to do the legwork, whether it's you or whether you sign with an agency to do it. And you are able to reap the benefits from the marketing deals that you generate. And what colleges and universities are doing now is they're hiring marketing departments and they're hiring NIL positions. And the only reason why they're doing that is because they want to make sure that these colleges, that they have control over the narrative in terms of who their athletes are aligning with, how much time their athletes spend working on these marketing deals outside. So that's why they're doing that, so they can continue to control it. So I know maybe we weren't going to talk about some real answers, but I wanted to give a real answer if people are tuning in. So I wanted to be honest and be frank in that department for sure.
And I'd like to let our listeners know that you probably know the most of anybody, especially based off of location, where Nike is based in Eugene, Oregon, where the university is, and the Ducks and their yellow gloves. Everybody knows them because of sports marketing there.
Right. No question. it's a sports marketing is an amazing field. It's been around for a while, but it's still in its infancy. And so actually all for players being able to monetize their brands and their images, and and being able to um, participate in that. And the words I'm looking for is I'm thinking about a particular instance. I'm going to date myself a little bit. Greg Anthony, who is an amazing NBA analyst, who works for TNT, great NBA analyst, NBA TV as well. He played at UNLV, and UNLV is one of there have been various documentaries done on those great UNLV teams and what they meant from a marketing perspective for the NCAA, for UNLV. And I'm referencing him because he had a very, very successful t-shirt company while he was in college playing point guard at UNLV. And in order for him to complete his eligibility and play while he was at UNLV, he had to shut down that t-shirt company. And it's not fair, very archaic, it's just an archaic way of doing business. And the fact that these athletes, student athletes, have a chance to participate in the earnings. And again, I want to continue to specify, these are the earnings that they generate. There isn't a revenue sharing plan in college athletics. Contrary to what people believe, college athletics allows people that are against revenue sharing to think that this is a revenue sharing sort of program or initiative between college athletics and the student athletes that represent these universities. And that does not exist.
Switching over to the basketball aspect, without adding any pretext, how did you become a Phoenix Sun scout?
It's something that I always wanted to do. You work in the basketball, when you're in the basketball or in sports, you are in the relationship business. And so everybody knows everybody. And I was fortunate enough to get to the Suns, but I did some consulting on my own. I did that. Also, when I was working at Nike, because I had a scouting background when I was at ESPN and scouting for the NBA as well, because the NBA had a scouting outfit and we did all of the invites for the Combine, PIT, the Portsmouth Invitational, which was the top 64 or so seniors in the country. So we handled that. So I always wanted to be in scouting. I was fortunate enough to become friends with a person by the name of Ryan McDonough, who was from the Boston area, was the assistant GM for the Boston Celtics when they won the title in 2008, became the GM of the Phoenix Suns, and maybe 3 years or so into his tenure, I was fortunate enough to be become a scout for his Suns. And again, great experience. We had a very small staff, so I was able to scout college, international, the professional ranks, of course, the high school ranks. So amazing learning opportunity for sure.
I can think of various circumstances where, per se, media personalities transfer their skills and their expertise to front offices in a variety of leagues. Why do you think that you were able to do it, and that the success that you had, per se? And I'm going to follow up with that one by asking, what was it about Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton that the organization could not pass up on, and that did become successes, and that they were not draft failures?
I think when you're in the media, again, it forces you, and I was fortunate enough as well to be a point guard. And being a point guard, you really see the game from a multitude of different angles. Not only do you see it from a multitude of different angles, you have to really be able to understand different personalities, because different players on your team respond to different ways of motivation. Some players you can be very direct, and some players you have to massage the message a little bit. Let me say it that way. And so you really have to understand that. You really have to embrace that if you really want to be a great leader and a great point guard. And the ones that understand that are the ones that end up being all-time greats. I think LeBron James is a great example of, even though his size and his position may not say point guard, but technically, but from a practical standpoint, he is a point guard. And one of the things that I feel like's really helped him is being able to understand those different personalities and how to relate to different people and different people from different backgrounds, different ways of thinking. Again, some people you can be very direct with. Some people you have to massage the message a little bit with. And so being able to do that and seeing the game from multiple angles and not only knowing all of the sets and the personality and the disposition of my team, you have to know that for the opposition as well. And those are things that transfer into the media where you can see things happening and transpiring before it actually happens and conveying that to the audience. And I think being able to, again, customize that message to convey that you're an expert, convey your expertise, but also doing it in a way where you don't take over the broadcast and make it about you, because after all, it's about those girls and guys that are out there competing on the floor. They're the story. You're just a vehicle to help tell the story. And so I think that's one of the things that's really helped me as I transferred into evaluating players. And when you're doing that, one of the skills that I was able to, whether it was at the Suns or whether I was at Nike, when we're evaluating players for the purposes of when they become pros, is it a player that we want to sign? I think being steadfast and firm in your opinion on the player, but also doing it in a way where you're not being disrespectful of someone else's opinion, and you're your mind is open enough to see someone else's perspective, I think allows you to arrive at the best decision. And being a point guard and seeing the game from a bunch of different angles and processing the game from a bunch of different personality perspectives, I think is something that really helped me. And going back to Devin in particular, I think I said at the top of this, when you're evaluating players, I think that organic love of the game is something that's undervalued. And that was something that I saw from Devin immediately. Just his willingness and the sacrifices that he made, because he's from Michigan and he went and he left Michigan and moved to Mississippi to live with his dad because he said that he wanted to be an NBA player. So he left and went to a completely different, he left home, moved to the South, completely different environment, completely different culture, and he stuck it out. And then once he went to Kentucky, people forget that he didn't start a game when he was at Kentucky. He came off the bench. And what that showed was his ability to adapt to different situations and his skills. Yes, the sacrifice and his skills from an efficiency standpoint to be able to play with other great players, because he played with Karl Anthony Towns. He played with Tyler Ulis, who was the SEC Player of the Year and SEC Defensive Player of the Year in the same season. So he played with guys that were great players. They were an undefeated team heading into the NCAA tournament. So, and they lost in the Elite Eight as an undefeated team. So, with that being said, those are one of the things that really stood out for me. And for DeAndre Ayton, bigs usually develop at a slower pace than guards because they don't have the ball in their hands on every single possession. And it's a dependent position. You're dependent on somebody giving you the ball. So I figured that one of the terms that I used with DeAndre Ayton was he'll be greater later. And that's what's happening right now. He is really, really starting to.
It took him a year or two.
It took him a year. It took him a couple of years. And that's what happens with most bigs. It's going to take them a little bit of time because they don't touch the ball on every single possession. The learning curve is different. The game is also changing. So he has to find his spots, and he's starting to find his spots now.
Last week, the NBA announced that Phoenix Suns and Mercury owner Robert Sarver would be suspended for 1 year and fined $10 million after an independent investigation found he engaged in hostile, racially insensitive, and inappropriate behavior in the workplace. What's your reaction to these findings?
It's unfortunate. It's very unfortunate. And, it sort of brings to light some of the difficult circumstances that people have to work under at times that they don't talk about. I think one of the other things that is a little bit disheartening about it as well is we still live in a world where which is great that there's a lot of focus on mental health. There's a lot of focus on everyone's experience, which is awesome. But I think one of the things that is very disheartening today is I know we live in a world where there's sometimes false accusations. But at the same time, even though I think there's a balance between deciphering whether an accusation is false or not, or or having to wait 15 years before you have a multitude of different happenings over a 15-year span for people to say, oh, wow, I guess some of these things are credible now. It does not take 15 years. And what we lose track of is in that 15 years, there are lots of people that have been impacted. What about all the things that people have to deal with? What about all the things that they have to endure before someone says, you know what, that's credible now? And I still think we live in a world where, yes, there are false accusations, but we also live in a world where the burden of proof has to be so obvious that there are things that happen to the people that these acts are committed upon to make certain that they expose someone that is committing, some unfortunate or unscrupulous acts upon them. There's a price to be paid for that. And or the person that is, for lack of a better term, let's call them the accuser. They pay a price, whether it's a mental price, whether a psychological price, whether there's an occupational price. They pay a price with their career. But nonetheless, I think we need to get to a point where it doesn't take almost 20 years before we look and say, you know what? Maybe some of the things that people were saying were credible, because there are lots of things that happened in 20 years. So I think it's very unfortunate. I feel for everybody that's been involved, because again, we don't know what it's cost them. And I just hope that in the future, whether it's comments by Robert Sarver, whether it's comments by Donald Sterling, and whether it's comments and actions by Daniel Snyder for the Washington Commanders, you can just, there's just a litany of things that have taken place, whether the things that happened at Michigan State or United States women's gymnastics. I just think in general, we have to be better human beings. And because sports is such a glamorous world with scarce opportunities, sometimes people in influential positions take advantage of their power. And sometimes some of us that are in these positions that are seeking these amazing positions have to endure things that are certainly inhumane.
Well, I wanted to thank you for addressing that issue. I know a lot of our listeners were wondering what is going on, especially with your ties to the Phoenix Suns organization. I wanted to move on, though, and actually talk about contracts.
Yeah.
Having worked for a professional team, a broadcast network, and a sports agency, can you comment on the changing atmosphere of sports broadcasting contracts and increasing number of maximum salary contracts across the NBA?
I think the maximum contract and everybody sort of gets upset at the maximum contract, and it's, I can't believe they're paying these guys this or that, and this is always from a perspective where we are, for lack of a better term, the owners never open their books. And when you look at a player, you just Google their name and their salaries come up. So essentially, you can count a player's money and you can never count the owner's money. And it creates an interesting dynamic, because what happens is the owners and the commissioners of these various leagues, again, everything's about narratives. They fully allow the public, whether it's I'm not a person that believes in semantics. I'm a word guy. I write, I talk for a living. So you mean what you say, and you say what you mean. I'm saying this for a reason, because there's a stark difference between a strike and a lockout. A strike is the owners say, don't come to work. I'm sorry, a strike is the players saying, we're striking. we're not coming to work. A lockout is the owner saying, we're going to lock down the facility because we can't agree on the financial terms. Players don't show up at work. And the reason why I'm referencing the lockout and the strike is because even though both are very, very different in nature in terms of who originates the action, with a strike, the players initiate the action. With the lockout, the owners initiate the action. Even though that's different, the players get blamed for both. Because you can Google the players' salaries and people say, think about Joe Q Public. They never say the owners are making blah, blah, blah. I can't believe this. They always say the players are making this, this, and this. I would play this game for free. So the players always get blamed, whether it's a strike or a lockout. And all of these initiatives are in place to really, to a certain extent, limit player movement. And sometimes the owners want it both ways, because I'll ask you, right after the draft, the first week in July, why is the first week in July so interesting in the NBA? Because everybody's talking about where player X is going to sign. So it creates interest. And that interest translates to the NBA now has a big television deal coming up. Why do you think the television deals in the NBA are so big? Because these players are so interesting in terms of where they're going to go next. That's become a narrative that the NBA loves. Even though they don't love it, they love it.
That's really interesting, because I know everybody hates, or the NBA was commenting on Kevin Durant, and his verbiage and what he was announcing, and we know other players, but then we also know that they love it when Adrian Wojnarowski drops a massive Woj bomb, or Shams, or whoever it may be. That's really interesting to think about.
Absolutely. And this is going on during baseball season, right? So there's no NFL training camp during this time. Baseball season is going on. So you would think baseball dominates the sports landscape, but it doesn't. People are talking about, and I'll say this, people are talking about NBA free agents, NBA free agency. Where's Kevin Durant going? Where is Kyrie going? And then I'll say this as well. I'm a huge women's basketball fan as well. I have a show called The Dub Connect that I do where I talk about the WNBA with my co-hosts, and we do an amazing job over there. My co-host Jackie Ray. So we do a great job over there, giving you real perspective on the WNBA also. So I love women's basketball. So during that time period, it's just, you would think the Major League Baseball is dominating the sports landscape, and it's not. So the fact that, and then the other thing too is the maximum contract. Whenever we see a major player, and I mean that in a figurative sense, in the NBA switch locales, there's always this sort of rush to action or call to action by NBA teams to limit the movement. And, case in point, let's talk about LeBron James. And, there's a lot of talk about LeBron James going to different teams. But LeBron James has never been traded, has never asked for a trade. He has always played out his contracts. So what does that mean? That means that he's earned the right to become a free agent.
Rather than leaving 4 years early.
He's earned the right to do that. Exactly. And so when he's earned the right to do that, we still have an issue with it. So it becomes an issue where, again, because this narrative is all about whatever the players do, people will have, for the most part, a negative reaction to it. So whether that player asks for a trade or whether they play out their entire contract and go to a new team, they're going to get killed regardless. And nobody really, because the owners never open their books, nobody says when the ownership makes a move that's quote unquote best for business, there's never a lot of criticism about that. There's never a lot of criticism about that. It's, okay, this was best for our team. We had to let this player go, and that player could continue to produce at a high level. The only time in my memory that I could see a team receiving a great deal of criticism from moving off of a player when that player was still very, very, very productive is 1998 when the Bulls decided to close the books on the dynasty, the Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, last three titles, Dennis Rodman, all coached by Phil Jackson. When they decided to move on from that, there was a lot of flack that Jerry Krause, who was the GM at the time, Jerry Reinsdorf is the owner of the Bulls. They faced a lot of criticism for that. But even when you look at New England, and maybe you could shed some light on that because I don't live in the area anymore, but when they made the decision to move on from Tom Brady, I don't know if the organization got killed for it. It was
Yeah, there was a lot of criticism because the debate immediately the next day was who's going to survive? Is it going to be Brady or is it going to be Belichick? Now,
mm-hmm,
obviously, one has won a Super Bowl, one is not, and
right.
one right now is leading in the NFC South, and one is in third place in the AFC East. So I definitely see where you're going there because it definitely goes back and forth. I think, you know, Brady definitely was at the end of his tenure. But I think we every single year we think he's at the end of his tenure, and sure enough,
Right.
every year he's not.
Right.
So
Right.
that Brady conversation we'll set aside for another day.
For sure. For sure. Sounds good. I love to do that.
What about though from I guess with commenting on the sports broadcasting contract, since more specifically I just think about inside the NBA and how much how much they're being paid, or specifically in the NFL, and you see the monopoly and the translations and transfers from Thursday night football to Sunday night football to different slots within CBS Fox.
Yes, and that's all reflective of the amount of interest that we're seeing now in the sports and how much people are watching. And with all of these different, as everybody's going digital now, content is key. Everybody wants content, and if you can get the best sort of analysis to take people behind the curtain, because that's certainly what I rely on when I'm calling games, is the ability to take
Give you
people
something
behind.
different.
Yes, take people behind the curtain from working for a team, from playing, working in the media myself, financial decisions, branding decisions as well. Um, I did during the last dance when we were all holed up in our houses. Um, I did every Monday, I would go live and I would talk about from my perspective of wearing 23, from playing, from working at Nike, working at ESPN, working for a team. Um, I would talk about some of the things that were going on in the last dance and give my perspective on it. Um, I think technology has given rise to people wanting that authentic experience. And they want that from a sports broadcasting standpoint as well. And you're starting to see these networks pay major, major dollars to providing that experience. And I think it's something that the league has to continue to embrace. And they have to do it with balance. Everything is about balance because you have to create, everybody is all about experiences. So you have to create these amazing experiences from a viewing perspective for your fans at home, but you also have to continue to contribute and validate the experience when you go for an in-person experience. Because if you're asking me to pay a premium for a ticket, but I can watch everything in 4K at home, what's my incentive to come to your arena and pay a premium for that? So you have to walk that line and that tightrope, and all leagues have to do it.
And I think something, and this is just a prediction by me, but I do think that we've seen this at least, we've seen this both in the NBA and the NFL, that you see now perspectives from a refereeing standpoint. And I think something that would be very intriguing is to have former general managers and those within operations come on. And I wonder if we'll see more of a spotlight on what happens behind the scenes. And, you know, when a player signs a large contract or they're traded or cut a particular week, what led to that? And I wonder if we'll see a perspective from former members of the brass.
I think we will see that. And again, because everybody wants to, I mean, when you look at and DFS continues to grow and um when you're talking about from a fantasy perspective. So with that being said, everybody, whether it's from a fantasy perspective, whether it's when they're playing NBA 2K or Madden, everybody thinks that they're a GM. And so they welcome that perspective because they want to not only learn that perspective from a GM or a former scout, they also want to match their wits and say, you know what, that person doesn't know what they're talking about. I can do their job. So that's what social media is also giving rise to also. So those are things that when I remember when I wrote my first article for ESPN and I went to the comments and I hosted a chat on that article and I got my feelings a little bit when there were people that agree with me because we all love confirmation bias. And then there were people that he's an absolute idiot. And someone that is a media person, that is a well-known media person, sat me down and said, you know what? Whether they agree with you or whether they're saying you're an idiot, they're commenting, and that's what you want. So, so
All about the
I
likes and interactions.
absolutely. So now, having said that, do I say things for likes and interactions? No. One of the things that I say a lot on my shows is hashtag RTO, real talk only. When you come to me, that's what you're going to get. So, so I'm going to give you the real. I'm not doing things to, and shout out to the people that make those hot takes. Those people will probably make more money in this space than I'll ever dream of. But when you have real relationships in the industry because you have boots on the ground experience, it's hard to say inflammatory and incendiary things when they're not real. So I'll never go that route.
Well, I do want to be real and talk about the career aspect of working in the sports marketing industry and sports business. When I listen to conversations on campus, I notice a plethora of students are interested in pursuing a career in sports business. What advice do you have for them?
Continue to research the industry and find out the segments of the industry that you're interested in. Because the days of, say, let's say working for a team, you know, it used to be, even when I was at Brandeis, it used to be people would say, hey, if you want to work in a specific area for a team, just go work for a team in general, get your foot in the door, and then sort of weave your way to the department that you want to be a part of. Well, when teams employ maybe 50 people, that may be the route that you could go because it was sort of all hands on deck. But now technology has led to specialization. So now teams employ 200, 250 people. So if you want to, say, for example, go work in baseball operations for the Boston Red Sox, the days of going to community relations and going to the baseball ops department and saying, hey, can I help you out? Because this is where I really want to work. That's done because baseball operations has their own interns. They have their own entry-level employees that handle the things that you would handle if you were helping out trying to weave your way to baseball operations. Every department has their own interns. Every department has their own entry-level people that handle those things. So with that specialization, you know, you should probably take some time to research the industry, look at different segments of the industry, and have conversations with people that work in those segments to see if you're interested in it and start charting your course that way.
Now, playing Division III basketball, attending a small liberal arts research institution, and graduating with degrees that are predominantly unrelated to sports marketing and business, what is your perception about the idea that majors matter? Or is it less about that and more about what skills do you bring to the table and what connections do you have / can you make?
I think it's both because my background in economics helped me a lot.
Okay.
So I think it's both. If you could find things that you're interested in, I think that would certainly help you to get a leg up in terms of learning about the industry. But at the same time, you know, all the time, there are people that when I was working at Nike, I worked with industrial engineers. I work with people at NASA. Like it's, if you have transferable skills and you're willing to move on and learn and allow yourself to be held accountable, you can grow in virtually any area of your choosing. Um, I think for me, that was one of the things that really helped me. So I think both being able to um, have that because even in my industry, there in my discipline, there were sports courses in my discipline that I took at Brandeis. Um, I also think too, playing in at the time when I was at Brandeis, we were the best Division III league in the country, us in the NESCAC. And we're very, very strong. Emory was in our league. Johns Hopkins was also played half of their schedule in our league. So we had, when I was playing at Brandeis, we had maybe 4 or 5 teams in the top 10 in Division III basketball in terms of the rankings. And league was very, very strong because a lot of us that played at a high level in the league were also recruited by Ivy League and Patriot League schools also, because we're all on that same sort of academic plane. Um, and the fact that we flew everywhere in our league, with the exception of NYU, made another amazing experience for me also. And for all of us that were fortunate enough to play in the UAA, just an amazing, amazing league, and balancing the academics and the athletics at Brandeis is something that helped me for sure as I got into my career.
Now, I also lastly wanted to ask, working at Boris Corporation, is a law degree necessary, and how did that play into working at an agency?
No, it's not necessary. I mean, it's great to have. It's a great to have, but it's not necessary. And really, again, having my background in economics and really being able to build and cultivate and foster relationships, and having all of the transferable experience as it relates to the players that I dealt with really helped me, because I have been fortunate enough to do everything in the life cycle of a player. I've done it. I played. I worked in athletic apparel. I worked in the financial management side. I've worked in the media. I worked for a brand. I've worked for a team. So everything that a player would touch in their career, I've done it. So those are all things that helped me and continue to help me. So I think, in addition to having a great education from a school like Brandeis, of course that helps me. Of course it does. But marrying that with my experience, and then if there isn't having the great academic, social, and athletic experience that I had at Brandeis, if that doesn't happen, a lot of the doors that have been open for me don't open, because having a school with the reputation that Brandeis has really opened doors for me. And then being able to get that experience and being open and having that accountability where you allow yourself to be coached, where you allow people to teach you, really helped me a lot.
Well said. Antonio Williams, thank you again for joining the program today and providing rare insight.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Let's do it again very soon. I'll have you on.